Story number 1. There are houses that breathe in silence, but this one screamed in the dark. It didn't creak, it warned. We weren't the first to be chased out, but I was the only one who knew why. The attic never opened, but something inside it knocked, and on the night I told my friends about it, it answered. I never believed in haunted houses until I lived inside one. The kind of place that doesn't just shelter you, it watches you. I was around 12 when my parents moved us into that time-worn relic. It looked like something out of an old black and white photograph. We were only the 4th family to ever live in it. The couple before us left in a hurry, and my dad joked that maybe they didn't like the draft. But I always felt it something heavy in the air, like the house was holding its breath. My bedroom was the smallest room upstairs at the end of the hall. The attic door was in my bedroom, so no one could have come in or out. I didn't realize how strange that was until I started waking up in other parts of the house. My dad told me I'd started sleepwalking. Sometimes I'd wander into their room and mumble nonsense. "Don't you see this book I'm reading?" I once asked them, wide-eyed in the middle of the night. Another time. "Maisie wants to play." They thought it was weird. I thought they were messing with me. But there came the banging. It was sudden. 6 hard knocks, fast, rhythmic, like a fist pounding the floor directly above my bed. I heard 6 loud bangs in the attic. They were fast-paced and directly above my bed. I bolted out of the room that night, heart pounding, no scream coming out. My parents brushed it off. "Squirrels," they said. "Squirrels don't bang like that." The second time it happened, I didn't wait. I left my room and climbed into my twin brother's bunk. I never slept in that room again. Something in the house didn't want me there, and I was done trying to prove my bravery to an empty ceiling. One night, I had 3 of my friends over. We were sitting on the floor of the living room, the house quiet but thick with tension. I told them the story about the attic, the knocks, the whispers. I just said the words when it happened. Literally, as I was talking about it, it happened. I remember going, "See?" 'Cause no one believed me. One girl ran home right after. The others stayed, but they didn't sleep. From that night on, the house wasn't subtle anymore. Doors began slamming shut for no reason. Heavy ones. One slammed so hard, it knocked every pot and pan off the hooks in the kitchen. Boxes fell over by themselves, pawns flew. Our dog was constantly barking and whimpering. Whatever was upstairs was moving now. Restless. Watching. It got worse when we packed. That's the part I still don't understand. It was as if the house knew we were leaving and wasn't happy about it. I always wondered why it got more intense when we were moving. Even today, years later, I still drive past that house. A man sits on the porch sometimes, always alone. I've thought about asking him, just once, "Hey, do you hear knocks at night? 6 of them? Do you know Maisie?" But I never do. There was one more thing I never told anyone, not even my brother. It happened the week before we moved out. I had been staying in his room ever since the second knock, but that night he was at a friend's house. So I figured that I could survive one more night alone. Just one. Around midnight, I woke up not in bed, but standing by the attic door. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember walking. I was just there, my fingers grazing the wooden frame, cold under my touch. Something whispered from behind it, not words, just breath. A slow, deliberate exhale, like someone or something was standing on the other side, waiting for me to open it. I didn't. Instead, I backed away, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat in the tub until morning. The attic door never opened the entire time we lived there, not once. But my dreams were filled with what was behind it. Sometimes it was a little girl. Other times it was something crawling, faceless, made of shadows. Maisie? I don't know where that name came from. I never knew anyone with that name. But in my sleep, I'd mention to her. Maisie wants to play. My parents told me I used to smile when I said it, like I was proud of her. What if she wasn't just a dream? We had a neighbor, Mrs. Kavanaugh, 80 if she was a day, and sharper than anyone in town. She baked cinnamon bread and always watched the house from her porch like she was keeping it in check. One afternoon, I wandered over and sat beside her. I was 11. I asked her who Maisie was. She dropped her bread, didn't answer me for a full minute. Then she said, "You need to be careful in that room, child. That attic has a mouth, and some names aren't meant to be spoken." I never brought it up again. But I wonder now, was Maisie real? A girl who lived and died there long before us? Or was she something older, darker, using a child's name to make itself seem innocent? When we finally moved out, my parents looked relieved, my brother too. But I couldn't stop watching the attic window. It felt like someone was behind it, watching me leave. I never saw her, but I felt her. I still live in the same town. The house is still there. That man still sits on the porch, and I still hear the knocks in my dreams. 6 every time. Story number 2. I was never afraid of the dark. The woods, the rivers, the Gulf waters at night, those were my refuge. But that night, under a buzzing light in an empty car wash, something changed. You ever feel like you're being watched, but the air is still and the world is quiet? Not just paranoid. Something primal, older than instinct. I'm not here to prove anything. I've hunted things that growl and hiss, but this thing I saw didn't belong to the world I knew. There's a moment when your brain stops trying to explain. That moment came when I saw a figure, black as pitch, floating where no shadow should. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I looked it in the face, or whatever it had for one, and I knew it was watching me. I was raised outdoors, hiking, saltwater, fly fishing, hunting, and I'm an Eagle Scout. This happened over 20 years ago in the panhandle of Florida. I had been working 12-hour night shifts for almost a year. I wasn't drunk or on anything else. Most nights, I just drove home and collapsed. But something about that evening made me take a detour. I missed the old things, the kind of things that reminded me of who I used to be. So I pulled my '67 Firebird off the main road and into that beat-up car wash, the one I'd gone to since I was a teenager. I took my '7 Firebird convertible to an old car wash. No other cars were there, and it was located on a main road. I pulled the car into the vacuum machines with the front facing the road and the rear towards the open-ended car wash bay. The parking lot lights buzzed faintly above, casting a pale pool of white across the pavement. I tossed out the floor mats and fed quarters into the vacuum, the long hose rattling as I dragged it over the leather seats. The car groaned a little as I leaned in, back bent, arms deep in the footwell. I was almost done when a strange silence pressed into my ears. The vacuum was still roaring, sure, but it was like my brain had tuned it out. Instead, something else tugged at me, something unseen. I straightened slowly. The scent of soap and old concrete hit my nose. That's when I felt it, the weight of attention. Not just being watched, examined. I turned. The first thing I noticed wasn't movement, it was the lack of it. The back bay of the wash stall, the one I'd passed 1,000 times, looked unchanged. But in the center, standing 2 feet above the wet concrete, was a shape. It seemed the shape was around 10 feet tall and at least 2 feet off the ground. It looked like someone's shadow. I could make out a head, shoulders, where the arms would be, and the legs. Not a person, not a trick of light, not some vagrant playing a prank. This was absence masquerading as form, darkness that stood where no shadow should. It didn't flicker, it didn't shiver, it simply floated. Humanoid, blacker than black, rimmed in faint arcs of energy like static caught mid-arc. The main body type was black with a TV-like fuzz effect through it, like on all the TV, around its full outline. Arcing around it, I tried to process it. Was I hallucinating? Stroke? My breath was steady, vision clear, heart calm. The fence was still there. The dumpster, the puddles, the city lights in the distance, all where they belonged, and yet it was there. Oh, what are you? I thought, but it didn't answer. It didn't move. It only regarded me. Some ancient part of my mind wanted to run. Another part, the one shaped by long nights in cypress swamps and Gulf storms, whispered, "Stay still. Watch it back." So I did. I got no bad feelings from it, and I didn't feel sick, just like it was there watching me. I acknowledged it in my mind and thought, okay, I'll see you. I was getting my things and about to leave. It never approached or moved. It was just there. Even now, I wonder if my calmness came from shock, or if the thing itself had a presence that quieted me. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't inviting either. Just observant. I grabbed the passenger side floor mat. Reflex, maybe. Or habit. It was stupid. I should have left sooner. I rounded the front of my car with it still there, sat down, started the car, looked back, and it was gone. I drove off immediately. No noise, no ripple in the air, no warning, just emptiness where it had hovered. I never told anyone. Not really. People talk, they laugh. I'm not here for that. But here's the truth. That shadow wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a demon. It didn't try to scare me. It simply was a watcher, a witness to something I'll never understand. And some nights, when I'm on a long stretch of road and the stars are hidden behind clouds, I wonder if it still remembers me. I didn't go back the next night or the next week, but I thought about it. Every time I passed that stretch of road, my foot would hover over the brake, my eyes drifting to that empty row of car wash bays. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I had imagined it. But a month later, I drove there again. Not to prove anything, just to see. It was earlier this time, just past sunset. There were still cars on the road, a few strays rolling through the wash, music playing from their windows. I parked in the same vacuum stall, left the engine running. I didn't clean anything. I stared at the bay. Nothing. No shadow, no fuzz, no hovering watcher. Just wet pavement and flickering light. The same physical space, but completely dead. I even stepped out, walked through the exact path it had stood. My boots echoed on the concrete. I ran my hand along the wall, half expecting it to shiver with that same arc of static. But there was nothing. No weight in the air, no silence that swallowed sound. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me feel worse, because now I knew that place could be empty. And I also knew that once it wasn't. On my way back to the car, I noticed something. A single strand of what looked like fishing line, stuck to the upper corner of the bay wall, fluttering in the air. But when I tried to touch it, it disappeared like a mirage. That night, I dreamed of it, the shape. But this time, I was behind it, looking out through its perspective, watching the car, watching me. When I woke, my nose was bleeding, just a trickle, just enough. Years passed. The memory faded, but never fully. You get busy, jobs change, families grow, but something about that encounter never left me. Not in a haunting sense, just persistent, like background static in your mind. Then something happened that tied it all together. I was out in Apalachicola Forest, scouting alone. I still hiked when I could, still chased solitude when life got too loud. The trees out there are tall and straight, and the dirt roads can run for miles. That afternoon, I stopped near an old hunting blind. It hadn't been used in years, judging by the moss on the ladder. I climbed it anyway, just for the view. And as I sat up there, I felt that same pressure again. That weight! I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but directly beneath me, not 10 feet out, something stood between the pines. Same size, same shimmer. The shape didn't move. It just waited. I stared for what felt like an hour, but when I blinked, it was gone. This time, I wasn't scared. I wasn't confused. I was certain it hadn't followed me. It hadn't found me. I had wandered into its place. There are things in this world, maybe not ghosts, not aliens, not folklore, that simply observe. They're not interested in scaring or helping. They're just documenting, watching, recording. And maybe that's what haunts me more than fear ever could. Because what if they've always been here? What if every quiet moment we've had under the stars, every tingle on the back of our neck, every time we almost turned around but didn't, what if that was them? I've come to peace with it. Whatever it was that night in the wash bay, it didn't harm me, but it changed me. Story number 3. The basement was cold, wide, and oddly welcoming. until I heard a man's voice that shouldn't exist echo my name. My family had just moved in. We were still unpacking when someone we thought was dead offered to help carry boxes. "Goodbye, Sam," he said softly. I froze because Uncle Alan had died hours before we saw him. My parents saw him. My sister joked with him. He stood in our kitchen. So why was Grandma screaming on the phone that he died that morning? I thought I was choosing my first room. I didn't realize I was inviting someone, something, to stay with me. Moving to a new house was supposed to be the beginning of something fresh, a clean slate, a better neighborhood, and, for the first time in my life, a room to call my own. My sister and I finally were going to have our own space, which was very welcome indeed. The excitement had been building for weeks, and when we pulled into the driveway, I could barely wait for the car to stop before I was leaping out. The house looked like something out of a suburban catalog. Neat, beige siding, a small front yard, a cracked pathway leading to a red front door. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. My parents were still fussing with the lock when I bolted inside. I sprinted up the stairs first, adrenaline and curiosity fueling my steps. I went up the stairs and liked the look of the room. Spacious, with a decent-sized window and enough sunlight to keep things bright during the day. But I wasn't settled yet. I made my way back down to the ground floor and inspected another room. I thought to myself that my parents would probably end up with this one, as it had an ensuite bathroom. Then I opened the door to the basement. The smell of cement and old wood drifted up as I descended. The light switch was stubborn, flickering, before it surrendered and lit the wide space below. It was quiet, not eerily so, at least not yet. Although not very well lit, it seemed perfect for all my needs. I walked across the cement floor, already mapping it in my head. Bed in that corner, foosball table near the post, the recliner and a TV here. It was going to be my kingdom. "I call the basement," I yelled, already racing back upstairs before anyone could claim it. But when I got to the kitchen, I saw someone unexpected. Uncle Alan. He was standing by the kitchen counter, chatting casually with my mom and dad. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I asked. "Oh, just thought I'd help out," he replied. There was nothing weird about it at the time. Uncle Alan always had this laid-back energy, the kind that made it hard to read what he was really thinking. He wore the same faded denim jacket, his hair a little tousled from the wind, or maybe sleep. He followed me downstairs as I told him about my plans for the room, where I'd put the game console, where I'd sleep, how I was going to decorate. He nodded along to every word like a patient older brother, hands in his pockets, not really touching anything, just there. We climbed back upstairs together, and he rejoined the adults in the kitchen. My mom noticed him straight away as it was her brother. She says, "Hey, Alan." And they started having a conversation, and he idles in the kitchen for a while I go and grab one of the boxes. I overheard someone offer him tea. Strangely enough, Uncle Alan respectfully declines and says that he isn't very thirsty right now, but that may be another time. We all laughed. Alan turning down tea, that was like a fish saying it didn't want water. Later that afternoon, we were all sitting around with pizza boxes spread across the new dining table. That's when Mom's phone rang. She's the only person with a mobile phone in the family. She picked it up casually, mid-bite. What came through the line changed everything. She went pale first, then quiet. Then she stood up, eyes wide, walking toward the hallway as the rest of us exchanged confused glances. A minute later, she came back in, her hands trembling. "Good, it's Grandma," she said softly. Alan's dead." We didn't believe her. Couldn't. "Well, that's not right. That's impossible," she kept repeating. "He was just here," I said. "He helped me move boxes." But she shook her head. He had been driving through a traffic light while it was green for him when a lorry went straight through the red light and smashed into him, obliterating his car and killing him pretty much instantly. Time froze. My dad put down his pizza. My sister looked at me with horror, blooming across her face. "How could he have been here?" she whispered. We didn't have answers. They made the drive back to the city that night. Mom and Dad. Grandma couldn't bear to identify the body, so my parents did it for her. They came back hollow. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. My sister and I just sat in the kitchen, staring out at the unfamiliar garden. A new house, a new life, stained already. We didn't talk about Alan after that. Not directly, not in depth. It wasn't until nearly a month later, over a quiet dinner, that Dad finally asked the question. "You all saw him, right?" Each of us nodded. We described what he wore, what he said, how he declined the tea, how he joked with us about the house. We had no logical explanation, and maybe that's why we stopped looking for one. That night, I went downstairs like usual. I turned on my console, played a bit, then got tired. I brushed my teeth and got into bed, staring at the half-moon glow from the basement window. It was peaceful for once, the kind of silence that hums under your skin. I closed my eyes. Then something shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just a soft sense of motion, like someone standing nearby. I sat up slowly. Nothing. I glanced around. The shadows were still. The room was empty. I laid back down, heart stilling. And then I heard it. "Goodbye, Sam." A whisper, a farewell, a voice I knew too well. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just ran up the stairs, onto the couch, and I never told anyone. Story number 4. There are nights that change nothing. And then there are nights that never let you sleep the same way again. If I'd walked just a little faster that night, maybe I wouldn't have seen it. But I did. And I've never forgotten. Some friendships end with hugs and photos. Ours ended in silence, shadow, and a memory only I seemed to carry. I was 8. I didn't understand fear, not real fear. That night taught me. She says she doesn't remember, but I do. Every single moment of it. I was only 8 when I spent my last night at Mia's house. We'd been friends since kindergarten, inseparable through scraped knees and shared snacks. My family was moving to the coast, and this sleepover was our goodbye, an innocent send-off between 2 little girls who hadn't learned how final goodbyes could feel. We did the usual stuff, drew silly comics, traded the glow-in-the-dark stickers, watched cartoons until our eyes stung. Mia's mom made popcorn, and her dad tucked us in with a laugh and a wink. It was the kind of night you imagine forgetting, one that blends into hundreds of others. But this one stayed. I stayed over at a friend's house when we were both 8 years old. I was moving to another part of the country, so it was going to be our last day and night together. I woke up in the middle of the night, the kind of wake up where your body feels alert before your mind even knows why. The room was quiet. Mia's soft breathing filled the silence. I needed the toilet, but something about the stillness felt off. There was a tightness in my chest, like someone had paused the whole house. I got up carefully so as to not make any noise and opened the bedroom door. Oh man, what I saw in the hallway made me freeze. The house should have been dark, but there was this dull, unnatural hue to everything. I could see just enough to make out shapes, and in that grayish blur, and it moved. In the darkness of the house, I could make out some kind of humanoid shadow walking down the hallway. It didn't walk like a person. It glided. Shoulders unnaturally stiff, arms long and limp by its sides. No sound, no breath, just that awful, steady movement. I rubbed my eyes hard. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I was still half asleep. I rubbed my eyes, confused, and when I looked again, it was gone. Gone. I stood there for what felt like minutes, too scared to breathe, too confused to move. The silence wasn't comforting. It pressed in like a wall. Every shadow in that hallway seemed heavier, like they remembered something I didn't. It caught. I ran back into the room, heart pounding in my throat. I shook Mia awake. I went to wake my friend and told her what happened. She blinked, annoyed at first, but then she just stared at me. Her face went pale, lips parted. She didn't ask me to explain, didn't tell me I was dreaming. Instead, after a long pause, she whispered she had been feeling the atmosphere in her house strange for a few days. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to know what she meant. Had she seen it too? But before I could, her mother's voice called from the other room, distant but stern. That was the end of it, as her mother had to hear my loud footsteps as I went back into the room and asked for us to go to bed. So we did. Mia pulled the blanket over her head. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the scoots. That silence had weight. Years passed. We lost touch. Life moved on like it always does. But that night never left me. From time to time, I will write to her and ask her about that night. But she says she doesn't remember anything, not even the strange atmosphere she said there was. It's the same every time. She says she doesn't recall. She laughs it off or changes the subject. I don't push. But I wonder, is she protecting herself from what she saw? Or am I the only one who truly saw it? Sometimes, in half sleep, I see it again, the figure gliding just past the edge of field vision. And I remember the feeling, like we weren't supposed to be awake, like something else had taken over the night. If she truly doesn't remember, maybe that's a mercy. Story number 5. It was the kind of night where shadows felt too thick and the air refused to move, like the world was holding its breath. My town wasn't famous for anything. No murders, no monsters, but there were houses everyone crossed the street to avoid. Ours was next to one. Sometimes you don't see ghosts, they see you first. I have never believed in hauntings, but the man I saw that night wasn't alive. I know that now. He stood barefoot in the streetlight, arms stiff, legs splayed, waiting maybe for someone foolish enough to make eye contact. When I was still in school, probably elementary or middle, my mom was driving me home from something and it was dark. When we got to our street, I saw someone standing on the sidewalk in front of my neighbor's house. That house had always made me uneasy, like it was trying too hard to look normal. We called it the blank house. No one stayed in it long. Sometimes you'd see curtains shift even though it had been empty for months. That night, the figure wasn't just standing. He was posed, almost unnaturally still, like a wax figure left in the wrong museum. A blue jumpsuit clung tightly to his body, striped with dark lines. His arms were pinned to his sides, his legs twisted open, toes on bare feet digging into concrete like claws into flesh. I stared, and he didn't move. My mother didn't seem to notice him. Her eyes were focused on the road. That struck me as odd, because everything about him screamed, "Look at me." But it was like he wasn't there at all, at least not for her. And the house had been known for decades to everyone that lived in it to be haunted by whom or whatever they never knew. One family joked about the ghost, called him Bob, like giving a name made it safer. Bob opened kitchen cupboards, slid drawers, made the floors groan. They moved out after 6 months. The man on the sidewalk wasn't Bob. This man didn't belong anywhere. Not in this time, not in that neighborhood, not in our world. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. And then his neck started to turn, not naturally. It moved too slow, too deliberate. I could feel his gaze reaching toward me even before his face did, like cold fingers crawling up my spine. I broke eye contact, fast. My mom glanced at me, confused. She hadn't seen him. When I looked back, the circus guy was just gone. No running, no sound, no motion, just vanished. The space where he had stood was too empty. It felt vacuumed, like even the air remembered him and was trying to forget. I tried to reason to myself that he just jumped off, ran off, and was too fast for me to notice him. And it had been dark. But I knew better. There were lights on every lawn, street lamps casting halos. It wasn't that dark, and yet no one else saw him. No neighbors peeking out, no dog barking, just me, just him. For a moment, I guess he was just one of the ghosts around the neighborhood. It was built decades prior, and my family hadn't been the original owners. After that night, I stopped walking past that house, but I started feeling watched in my own home, mostly downstairs, in the hallway, at night, always at night. Sometimes I see shadows move where no light should be. Sometimes I wake up with the feeling that someone is standing just beyond my door frame, legs akimbo, arms stiff, waiting, and always barefoot. Years have passed. The house next door has changed hands 4 times since. Ah, miss. But last week, just after midnight, I drove home and saw something out of the corner of my eye. A man, dressed in tight blue, standing under the same street light. Not moving, not breathing, just waiting. I didn't look directly at him this time. I didn't need to. I already knew. Story number 6. If I told you the creepiest thing in our kitchen wasn't the rats or the grease trap, would you believe me? We serve high tea in bird cages. Elegant, right? Until one of those cages tried to break my leg. Old buildings have creaky floors, strange drafts, and sometimes things that move on their own. There was no one behind me, no wind, no earthquake, just me and a cage that flew. After that day, the kitchen was never silent again. Something had awakened. I work as a dishwasher in a cramped kitchen tucked at the very top of a centuries-old building. You could smell its history. In the stone walls and warped wooden floorboards, locals claimed the upper floors used to be a private club during the 1800s, opium, poker, brothels, the whole deal. But now, it was a trendy restaurant serving quirky food to curious tourists. One of our most bizarre offerings is something called tipsy tea. Imagine an afternoon tea. But instead of dainty plates and tiered stands, the food is served on bird cages with 3 shelves. Yeah, real metal cages, the kind you'd expect to find a parrot in. It's cute until you're the one who has to scrub them. These cages hang on rusty hooks on the far side of the kitchen, right across from the dishwashing station, my zone. After a long rush of customers had come and gone, the kitchen was finally quiet. I was alone at my sink, sleeves rolled up, hands soaked, loading the last few grimy plates into the dishwasher. That's when I felt something hit my leg with hard force. Startled, I turned around and saw one of the bird cages was lying on the floor. It didn't just fall, it landed with force. I instinctively looked for someone who might have thrown it, but no one was in the area. The 2 chefs were in the walk-in fridge chatting about stock orders. The 3rd chef was near the oven, prepping for the next rush. There's no way any of them could have thrown it, unless they grew invisible arms or learned telekinesis. My skin crawled. I didn't say anything right then. I picked up the cage, checked for dents, and hung it back up like nothing happened. But my heart, it was pounding like I'd just run up the fire escape. That wasn't the end, not by a long shot. The next few days, things started shifting. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make you question your own sanity. Spatulas missing, utensils turning up in weird places. A chef's knife found wedged perfectly between tiles in the wall. Then came the sounds. Not pots clanging or staff yelling, the usual chaos of a restaurant kitchen. These were different, deliberate, like someone whispering behind you, like someone walking barefoot over stone. Once, I swear, I heard someone humming an old tune, something Victorian, it stopped the moment I tried to follow it. No one else seemed to notice at first. Or maybe they just didn't want to. But it all changed one night when the youngest cook, James, was prepping pastries. He was reaching into the dry rack when the same cage, yes, that exact one, fell inches from his head. He quit that night. I started digging into the building's history. Turns out, before it was a restaurant, it was a private residence owned by a wealthy surgeon. Rumor had it, he kept a woman, his mistress, some said, locked on the top floor after she went mad with grief. She used to keep birds, dozens of them. Locals recalled strange chirps echoing into the street, even after she was declared dead and the room emptied. And guess where her room used to be? Exactly where the kitchen now sits. One night, I stayed late after close. I was determined to face whatever was there. I turned off all the lights, except the small one above the sink, and waited. The cages swung gently, even though there was no draft. At exactly 2 hours, a soft metallic cling run out. I turned and froze. There she was, a woman in a soot-stained apron. Her hands were wrapped around the bars of a cage that wasn't there a second ago. Her eyes met mine. They were hollow. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just whirled, and then she was gone. I told the head chef everything. He didn't laugh. Instead, he sighed and unlocked a drawer I'd never seen open before. Inside was a small cage, much older than the ones we used. Black, rusted, no shelves. We kept this since the place opened, he said. Every time we tried to throw it away, something bad happened. I asked what he meant. He just looked at me, tired. One guy lost a finger, another slipped and broke his back. So, we keep it. We respect the cage. The next day, it was hanging next to my station. No one told me to, but I started saying hello to it each morning. Good night, each shift. And every time a new cage fell or moved, I whispered, "I see you." Things calmed down after that. Not completely, but enough. Sometimes when I'm alone, I still feel something watching. The other staff rotate too quickly to notice. But I've been here the longest, and now I know. The kitchen isn't haunted, it's occupied. Story number 7. I never believed in guardian spirits. That is, until I met Norman. We were new to the neighborhood, and the realtor conveniently omitted the house's colorful history. It wasn't until the first sleepless night, when I saw a tall shadow outside the front window, that I realized something had been left behind in this home. It wasn't just a trick of the light. Every time one of us broke down in tears or trembled with stress, the scent of cigarette smoke wafted through the air, though no one in the house smoked. And in those moments, we felt a warmth, not from the heater, a pressure, gentle and firm, like arms around your shoulders. I used to think the scariest part of this house was what had happened in it. But the real story wasn't about death. It was about survival. And the wall that should have shattered, was only the beginning. Let me tell you what happened the night we learned Norman's name. The first time the house truly felt alive was the night the car crashed. My husband and I had fallen asleep in the front room. The window overlooked the street, an unfortunate layout. In hindsight, a drunk driver lost control and veered off the road. Witnesses said the car was going at least 60 miles per hour. I woke to the sound of drywall cracking behind me. The impact had been enough to shatter the outer siding and snap the 2-4 studs like twigs. But somehow, when we turned on the light, we saw that the drywall had only buckled slightly. The car had stopped just inches from our heads. We should have died. The firemen were baffled. So were the contractors. They couldn't understand how the car had lost all its momentum right before the bedroom wall. And neither could we. Not until years later, when the pieces began to connect. You see, strange things kept happening. Little things. That shadow outside the front window never went away. It would appear on nights when one of us felt especially low, dark, toss unmoving, and then came the smell, a strong odor of cigarette smoke. My husband would look around nervously, but I learned to relax, because in that moment, I felt something else. Like someone was giving me a hug, not cold, not frightening, just present. Like a father trying to comfort his child. We started calling it Norman, after an old note we found inside the attic, signed with the name. We don't know who Norman was, only that he once lived here. Some say he died in the house. Some say a man died of an aneurysm, and his wife later died due to prescription drug overdose from flu complications. There were too many stories and not enough records before 1970. The house was already 17 years old back then, but I'm not so sure Norman died tragically. I think he was taken. There's something outside the window. I've seen it more clearly over the years. It doesn't come in, but it wants to. A dark shape, like smoke but solid. It waits, just outside, near the corner where the car crashed. I don't know what it is, but it brings something with it. Fights break out after it appears. Illness spreads. A child's perished in a house fire years before we moved in. The previous owners didn't last long. We believe Norman holds the boundary. He shows up when someone inside is upset, anxious, spiraling, vulnerable. That's when he reaches out, keeping the bad things out, shielding us. I don't think he can cross the window line himself, but I think he can hold the wall. One night, my husband and I had the worst fight in years. I told him I wanted to leave, that the house was cursed. As I stormed into the front room to grab my coat, I felt that pressure again, like someone gently wrapping arms around me. The smoke hit my nose a second later, and then I saw it. The shadow outside, distorted by the street lamp, pacing, angry, waiting. Norman wasn't hugging me to comfort me. He was holding me still, telling me, "Don't open that door." I never did. To this day, when sadness sits too long in the air, he comes, my invisible guardian, holding the line, watching through the front window, never speaking, never stepping forward, just making sure nothing worse than a heartbreak gets through. If that drywall hadn't held, we'd be gone. No one believes me when I say it wasn't the structure that saved us. It was Norman. Story number 8. There's something unsettling about studying in a place where countless souls once begged for mercy and received none. They turned an ancient house of pain into a center of learning, but some lessons still echo from the crypt. When you spend nights in the university library, you don't expect the elevator to move on its own. Unless course, Incarna is studying too. Cleaning staff whisper her name like a prayer. Students dare each other to visit the upper cloisters after midnight. No one lingers alone. Not for long. I used to believe the stories were just to scare freshmen. But that changed the night I heard her walking behind me, bare feet brushing against ancient stone. I never cared much for ghost stories. University is stressful enough without thinking about spirits lurking in forgotten corridors. Yet, here I am, retelling what I swore I'd never admit to believing. I want to tell you a story about my university. But in order to do that, you must understand that this building is very old. It was first built in 1407, and it has been many things during its time being built and rebuilt. The history isn't just in textbooks. We live inside it. Stone cloisters echo every step. Archways cast shadows that linger long after you've passed. But they say the first use of this building was to house the Spanish Inquisition. A covenant of inquisitors lived here that tortured and executed heretics and those accused of insults against the faith. That much I read in our university archives, not Wikipedia. It gave me chills, especially when I realized the library stood exactly where the interrogated cells used to be. The building has changed over centuries, but after it was dissolved, the building passed from hand to hand being military barracks, the Provincial Monument Commission, until finally it became a university. But time didn't cleanse it. It simply added more layers to the haunting. They say the ghost is a woman, not a banshee, not a pale specter with glowing eyes, something quieter, more sorrowful. There's the rumor of the blurred figure. Some describe it as a faint white smoke, and they usually see it in the old covenant, such as the cloisters and the library or the church, even the upper stalls. It's subtle, always barely there. Most people shrug it off. But when you see it yourself, even for 3 seconds, the moment brands itself onto your memory. I stayed late one Thursday, working on a thesis draft, and took the elevator up to the top floor of the church annex. The doors opened to darkness. I stepped inside, and the elevator jerked upward with no one pressing the button. When it stopped, I felt the unmistakable weight of someone behind me. Cold air, a smell of burning incense. When I turned, there was nothing, only silence, only the knowledge that I was not alone. People speak of her without speaking of her, the janitors especially. A widespread superstition among the cleaning staff is when entering a room, they would say, "Incarna, please don't scare me," and when leaving the room would say good night to her. I've seen them mouth the words without sound. They won't say her name out loud if they can help it. Incarna isn't violent. She's disruptive. She rearranges furniture, resets clocks, opens locked doors. One professor told me he found all his chairs turned upside down after locking the classroom the night before. The nun's ghost is said to manifest itself in various ways, too, from apparitions to moving elevators in the middle of the night or disorganizing classroom furniture after the cleaners have finished their work in the classroom. The cleaners leave the rooms spotless, only to find papers strewn and chairs shifted come morning. That's why many of them leave. Many of the university's nighttime staff, ranging from cleaners and security officers have resigned since the university's opening. Can't blame them. You can only endure so many nights of hearing footsteps in locked rooms before something breaks inside you. Encarna prefers silence, but sometimes she wants attention. During exam season, the energy on campus shifts. Deadlines, coffee-fueled all-nighters, fear and exhaustion, all mixing like static in the air. And that's when she becomes strongest. Most of them agree that Encarna's appearances occur during the exam periods when the faculty opened its doors, so that students could stay even later at night in the night library. I remember one night, my friend Clara fell asleep in the theology section. She woke up an hour later, the lights flickering, with a book opened in front of her, not one she had taken from the shelf. It was a volume on spiritual possession. She never returned to that section again. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone played a prank. Maybe there was a logical explanation. But too many things kept happening. Motion sensors tripped in empty rooms, candle holders fell off altars without anyone touching them. Cold spots bloomed in the halls even during warm spring nights. I became obsessed, not out of fear, but curiosity. I dug into the university's older blueprints and found mention of a locked chamber beneath the cloister chapel, a former penance room. According to the records, it had been sealed after the last inquisitor died there. One night, I broke in. I brought my camera, a flashlight, and a naive belief that ghosts are just figments. The sealed door was easier to bypass than I expected. I descended into a cold, airless space. The walls were lined with rusted iron hooks and remnants of old robes. And then I saw her, not as mist, not as shadow, as a woman. A few have been able to distinguish that it looks a bit like a female figure dressed in a wide habit. Some even say that it could be a nun. Her habit flowed around her like smoke, but her face, what little I saw, was grief itself. Not malevolence, not wrath, just endless, eternal sadness. I whispered, "Encarna, I'm not here to mock you." She didn't speak, only lifted a hand and vanished. I ran, not out of terror, but because I felt something tear inside me. A veil, maybe, a belief. I myself have never seen anything, but there are many who have witnessed and experienced the hauntings of Encarna. But with such a spiritually charged place that's so ancient, I'm not surprised. Now, every time I walk past the library back hall, I feel her, watching, not angry, just waiting. And I say, "Good night," just in case. Story number 9. I had survived an abusive marriage, clawed my way out of darkness, and started anew. But I never expected the danger to return in the face of a smiling stranger from a dating app. There's a moment somewhere between trust and terror, when your instincts scream louder than reason. For me, that moment came too late. He wasn't charming. He wasn't handsome. He was safe. That's what I told myself. But safety, I would learn, is the greatest illusion. The first red flag didn't wave. It whispered. A lost key, a messy trailer, and a stare too long to be friendly. When I saw his truck parked outside my home, headlights off, rage in his eyes, I knew then I hadn't escaped danger. I had invited it in. Life after him was quiet, too quiet. My son's laughter filled the days I had him, but the weekends felt like abandoned warehouses of time and space. That's when the curiosity crept in. It wasn't romance I wanted. It was proof that I could be seen again. 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the first time. While most 25-year-old women have probably dabbled on Tinder or the like, I hadn't been single since I was 7. I'd lived a life of routines and diapers and dental appointments. Then I woke up in a new apartment with empty weekends and 1,000 what-ifs. I met my ex while I was in high school, and 6 years later, we got married, had a baby, and I was happy. But those last few years together, he had really began to resent me and the family we had created. I fought to keep our relationship together, but the abuse became more frequent and intense. It got to the point where I took the baby and fled the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scarred, my heart raw, and it was a very difficult time in my life. I picked up the app late one night while sipping on boxed wine and listening to my son snore. Swiping wasn't thrilling. It was numbing. Validation without connection. Then came Derek. He was ordinary, and that's what made him seem harmless. Average build, a bit of stubble, short bio about liking beer and hiking. In a sea of shirtless mirror selfies, he looked approachable. Derek and I shared a few interests: craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was so nervous. My first date in 8 years. The restaurant was bright, noisy, the kind of place where first dates could drown in fries and cheap cocktails. As I waited in the restaurant, my palms were sweaty, my heart was fluttering, and I began to question myself. Then he walked in, not late, not overdressed, just normal. We ordered our first beers and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol began to hit, our conversation took off. He had a laugh that made you think he wasn't afraid of being silly. I liked that. We talked music, exes, the weirdness of online dating. We joked about a karaoke across the street, and he laughed about how he didn't like karaoke. I convinced him to go. I always convince people to sing. Something about watching someone drop their walls and belt out bad 90s ballads, it tells you who they really are. The bar was buzzing with drunk joy and terrible vocals. Derek ordered shots like he had something to prove. We left the restaurant and sang into the night, taking shots, flirting and laughing, and we ended the night in his truck, clumsy, fumbling with each other's buttons and zippers, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We didn't talk about feelings. There were no illusions. I thought that made me safe. When a person tells you they don't want commitment, and you don't either, it's easier to pretend you're in control. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I had enjoyed our time together and liked that I didn't feel a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. Because my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings, he felt safe. We planned something spontaneous and messy, river tubing. The day was sunlit, the river was perfect, and our conversation floated as lazily as our tubes. Everything felt like summer should. We agreed that he would zip up my truck key into his pockets on his shorts, and then he would drop me off at mine afterwards. The afternoon slipped past as we floated down the river. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to my truck. Only when Derek reached into his pocket, his face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." The panic that hit me was disproportionate, but real. That key was my anchor to control. We spent the next afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key. Up and down we swam with very little hope that we would ever see the keys. I should have seen it then. The convenience of becoming needed, a man who helps you after causing the problem. But I didn't, not yet. At the very last place we checked, as the light of the afternoon faded into a hazy orange, something caught his eye. Underwater, near the shore, were my keys. We were elated and could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a shaded trailer. My instincts twitched. I wanted to turn back, but I didn't want to be rude. He told me that he was only renting a room from here from an elderly couple, but they were on vacation, so we would be alone. The house was the kind of dirty that isn't about laziness, it's about apathy. Not just a few dishes, but every surface was covered in mess. He ushered me away to show me his bedroom. It was small and not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, a Rubbermaid bin with some snacks like Doritos and cheap beer. We did the deed, and the yellow light of the trailer accentuated the stain on the walls. Afterwards, the spark of fun I'd felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. That was the last time I ever wanted to see him. A week passed, and we hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. It was like waking from a strange dream. But dreams don't send messages. Then I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. Hey, are you going to karaoke tonight? I was. He said he'd be there with a date. I told him it was fine. I meant it, sorta. I wasn't jealous, just unsettled. My friends and I were buzzing with excitement. When we arrived at the bar, we hadn't been out in months. But as soon as we settled into our booth, I felt it, the prickling heat of being watched. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. Why wave? Why now? I was absolutely fine with him being on a date, but I didn't want to advertise that we knew each other or make his date uncomfortable. But Derek didn't care. He made sure I saw him. Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kat and plopped down beside me, pulling her down into the booth next to him. She smelled like vodka and regret. I couldn't focus on her story because under the table, though, I felt Derek's sticky hands slide onto my thigh. His date, my thigh. Without making a scene, I subtly removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. Across the room, I watched him pretend to be a boyfriend to someone else while eyeing me like prey. It was the first time I felt fear, not confusion, not discomfort, fear. Kat's cab came. She left. And Derek stayed. He slung his heavy arm over my shoulder and leaned in. his sour breath managing to come together to form clumsy sentences. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." My stomach turned. My friends noticed. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation. One of them remarking, "You know you can do better than this, right?" We made a plan, just in case. Derek arrived at the table, sloshing his beer onto my front. He slurred, "Where were we going next?" We weren't. We were going home. He begged to walk us. We declined. He was leaning up against a wall and barely holding himself up. At that point, we asked him how he was going to get home and if we should call him a cab. Derek drunkenly pouted that he could just come to my place with me. No. I told him that my child was there with the sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He didn't need to know that wasn't true. He wouldn't take a cab. He said he'd sleep in his truck. Fine. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. It was time. My girlfriends and I slipped into the bathroom doors. One of our male friends offered distraction. The cool rush of air hit us, and we hurried to the path that led to their hotel. I thought we were free. For a moment, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I didn't answer, but he left voicemails. His drunken speech was more intense this time as he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left. I had hurt his feelings, and he was in love with me. What? Another voicemail? His voice shook with anger as he stumbled over himself, expressing how I had betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up echoed in the hotel room. "You know, I'm really starting to hate you." There it was, the crack in the mask. Yes, I rode home in silence. My friend drove. I said little. My chest was tight. My instinct screaming, "It's not over." That's when I saw the headlights. It was very late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtains and my blood ran cold. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. It's hot course. He wasn't getting out. He was just staring. How did he get here? How did he know where I lived? Then I remembered the other week when he dropped me off after my key was lost. My hands were trembling. He was blackout, obliterated. The phone rang again in a drunken sing-song voice, almost taunting me. He quietly said, "Where are you?" I couldn't ignore it anymore. I called 911. The red and blue light washed over my house like salvation. Derek started to stumble towards my house when the flashing red and blue lights cascaded down the street, lighting up his face and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features. 2 police cars pulled up and the officers got out. They breathalyzed him. He failed. One of the officers came to my door. I spoke to him about what happened, and he was very empathetic. He said Derek hadn't made a direct threat, but drunk driving, they could charge that. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road, and I could see him arguing, but the officers weren't having any of it, and they turned around and cuffed him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window. I was peeking out. "I know you're in there. Why don't you come out and say goodnight? Susan?" Derek texted me the next afternoon. "I'm sorry about last night. I was in a bad place." I responded that his actions were unacceptable And how dare he show up at my house where my child lives at, and that I would prefer to never hear from him again. That was the last time I ever heard from him. For a few months, I'd see him riding a bike across town. No truck, no license. I found out that he moved to the mainland a while back, which was quite a relief for me, and I no longer feel on edge around town. I learned something terrifying and crucial. Evil doesn't always snore. Sometimes it swipes right, smiles awkwardly, and buys you a drink. Story number 10. I never believed in ghosts until one whispered my name while I was alone in a locked basement. We weren't supposed to be there after dark, but the paycheck was too good to pass up. The moment the lights went out, I felt something watching me from the shadows. They said one man died down there, buried under grow lights and moss. But no one told me he still roamed the halls. That pen didn't fall. It was placed, dust ring and all, like someone wanted me to see it. I've walked into plenty of creaking, outdated buildings across Texas and New Mexico, many so old they seemed to hold memories in their walls. But there was something different about this one, a silent tension in the air, as if the place were holding its breath. The first thing I noticed wasn't the faulty wiring or ancient breaker boxes. It was the way the shadows lingered, how silence followed you like a stray dog. As an electrician that specializes in older buildings, I have a lot of work in Texas and New Mexico and had a fair share of encounters with the paranormal. That job started like any other, a structure that once served as a Cold War bomb shelter. It had recently been purchased by a company trying to modernize it into a data center. The layout was odd, thick, soundproof walls, heavy doors, and a long basement that felt more like a bunker than anything as commercial. On my first day, one of the guys told me, if you're ever alone down there, don't talk to the silence. I laughed it off. Most of these old-timers have their fair share of ghost stories. But what happened next made me think twice. We were installing electrical metal tubing along the basement ceiling. Ladders, drills, pipe racks. It was all routine. But then, as my coworker reached up to secure a conduit, a bundle of pipes resting flat on the concrete suddenly rolled. A bundle of pipes on the floor seemed to mysteriously get kicked. Nobody was near them. Startled, they exchanged glances, confirming that they were alone in the building. The doors were too loud and too heavy for anyone to sneak in. That's when it started, a growing awareness that we were never alone in that building, no matter how empty it seemed. Shit. Later that week, we had to do a complete overnight shutdown. I stayed late to verify the power disconnects, shutting down circuits and ensuring every tool was accounted for. It was nearly time to leave. I climbed the stairs from the basement slowly, my flashlight casting shadows in long vertical lines across the walls. I was double-checking tools and turning off lights at around 2:30 a.m., ascending the stairs from the basement. Then, just as I reached the landing, I felt cold breath on the back of my neck. I heard a whisper, "Hey," directly behind my right ear. My skin prickled. My body locked. I didn't look back. It wasn't a voice in my head. It wasn't the wind. Something had spoken to me clearly, intentionally, like it had been waiting for me to pass by. Without thinking, I bolted up the rest of the stairs, adrenaline overpowering reason. Bursting into the light, I blurted what had happened. My coworkers looked up, their faces unreadable. Then one of them smirked and, "Oh, you heard it too." 2 days later, during another overnight shift, I stayed inside the building to monitor heat-sensitive equipment. The AC system was barely keeping up with the outside temperature, but I settled beside the gear, taking comfort in the hum of the fans. That's when a small thud interrupted my thoughts. A pin had fallen right next to my shoulder. But here's the thing. There were no shelves above me. Nothing hanging. Curious. I picked up the pin and looked around. That's when I noticed it. A perfect dust ring. A dust ring perfectly shaped like the fallen pin. The pin had been sitting there a long time, undisturbed, until something or someone moved it. My journeyman attempted to rationalize the pin incident, suggesting vibrations from the equipment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been placed near me. A warning or a game? After that, I refused to stay inside the building. We monitored the equipment remotely, retreating to the safety of our truck. And that pin, I kept it, just to remind myself it really happened. I did some digging. The building had a past far more complicated than the company let on. During its first test as a shelter, 3 men were sealed inside to simulate disaster conditions. Tragically, one participant passed away during the first test. The records didn't specify how, only that he died before they could open the doors again. In their panic, the remaining testers buried him inside. The deceased individual was interred in a makeshift grave marked by dirt, peat moss, and grow lights intended for cultivating food. That grave still existed somewhere below, maybe beneath the storage room, maybe behind the ductwork we never touched. The more I learned, the worse the activity became. Footsteps pacing the first floor, doors swinging open then slamming closed, and once, I could swear, I saw a shadow leaning into the hallway, watching, leading to numerous instances where I rushed to investigate, only to find nothing there. That building changed me. I don't talk about it much, except to guys who've seen similar things. I still work on old properties, but I never work alone anymore. And if something feels wrong, I trust that feeling. The dead don't rest where they were buried in fear. They linger, they speak. They remember who disturbed their ground. And some buildings don't ever forget. Story number 11. I never believed a house could remember until mine did. Sunlight spilled through the glass, and yet dread soaked into my bones. There was no sound, no creak, no warning, just presence. What do you do when something stares at you from nowhere? I never told anyone. But years later, the house whispered to my sister too. When I was younger, I stayed home one day while the rest of my family went hiking. I felt no fear, no dread, just the comfort of an empty house and a quiet afternoon. Things were fine for most of the morning, and from memory, I think I just puttered around the house, cleaning up a bit and watching TV. Eventually, the soft warmth of the afternoon sun drew me to the floor beside the sliding door. It was around mid-afternoon when I decided to read a book. The light was perfect, calm, ordinary. But something shifted. The sunlight didn't change. My book hadn't moved, but my skin ignited, every hair standing upright, as though touched by electricity. There was no sound, but I felt it, eyes, attention, focused on me like a weight pressing against my chest. I turned my head toward the doorway that led from the kitchen to the lounge, and for a few seconds that seemed to last a lifetime. I saw the blackish shadow in broad daylight, tall, human-like, spiked hair like a silhouette drawn in chaos. It wasn't a hallucination. I felt its attention. I felt hunted. Then it stepped backward, gone. I didn't scream, didn't run. Somehow I stood up, knees shaking, and walked to the exact place where it had stood. The air was colder, still, but nothing else. There was no indication that it had been there except for the slightly cold spot in the doorway. I returned to my spot, book in hand, but I didn't read. I waited until I heard the key in the lock and the noise of family returning before I exhaled. That night, I told no one. Years passed. The memory dimmed, but never left. Then, one night, my younger sister and I were swapping strange stories. I hesitated, then described the man. Her face went pale. She had seen it too. She'd been alone in the house, standing in nearly the same place. A black shape, not a person, not quite a shadow, had formed against the wall near the lounge room. It stood there, watching, before fading. We sat in silence after she told me. Something deep in both of us knew we weren't imagining things. All three of us, at one time or another, had experienced the sound of someone walking around in the dead of night. Sometimes the sounds came from the kitchen, slow, deliberate drags. 3 steps, then silence. We never confronted our parents, and I never asked my older brother, afraid of what I might hear, or worse, what I wouldn't. But the 3 of us, the younger siblings, came to a quiet agreement. Something was with us in that house. We never tried to communicate with it. We never attempted to explain it, because the truth was, it didn't need to speak. It simply watched. And somehow, that was worse. I never saw the shadow man again while I lived there, but I'll never forget it. That day changed how I viewed silence, how I viewed shadows, how I viewed Ome. Sometimes the most terrifying ghosts don't haunt halls with noise or rage. They simply exist quietly, where you least expect them. And they wait. Story number 12. There are places in a house that feel untouched, as if something other than time is living in the silence. That basement was never just a basement. It had corners that refused to give up their shadows, even in daylight. I'd never slept down there before. I shouldn't have. Something was awake while I tried to rest. Something was watching. And when the Elmo toy spoke without warning, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I lived with my now ex-boyfriend, and I had fallen asleep on the couch in the basement. His daughter's toys were scattered near the wall. The TV was playing something softly, and my body was too drained to make the climb upstairs. It had been a long day, the kind that clings to your muscles like wet clothes. I wasn't planning to fall asleep there, but exhaustion made the decision for me. The basement wasn't finished, just cement floors, some old rugs, and rooms divided by shelves and curtains. There was a makeshift movie area, a space for laundry, and a little corner stuffed with pink and yellow toys for his daughter. Despite living there for months, I never felt comfortable down there. Maybe it was the smell, or the silence, or something deeper. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept waking up, groggy, confused, staring at the glowing TV screen showing a different show each time. My mind chalked it up to nerves, maybe stress. But each time I woke, I had the feeling that I'd missed something, as if something had moved when I blinked, as if I wasn't alone. Then it happened. I sat up, looked around, and didn't see anything, but I had heard it. A semi-loud bang that had clearly come from somewhere in the basement. Something had shifted. Something had dropped. Or been thrown. My chest tightened, but there was no movement, no voices, no indication anyone else was awake. I told myself it could have been the TV, the house settling, a toy falling off a shelf. I needed sleep more than answers. So I slumped back down, curled under the blanket, and let the heaviness return. Barely 10 minutes passed before I heard it again. A sharper sound, heavier, and this time it was followed by a voice. Not a human voice. It was artificial, high-pitched, childlike. Let's rock! The Elmo toy, the red plush thing that never moved unless you picked it up and rocked it. I get up, turn on the light, walk around over to it, and it's just sitting there, rigid, bright-eyed, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. My heart slammed against my ribs. Nothing else moved. No one else was down there. My boyfriend was upstairs, knocked out from a double shift, and his daughter wasn't even home. I bent down and looked at the toy. No flashing lights, no signs of malfunction, just silence now, like it was daring me to touch it again. I backed away. I didn't remember what the toy said beyond that first line. The rest was a blur, as if my brain had shut off the sound in defense. It was about 15 seconds of this freaking toy randomly making noise, but it felt like hours. It felt like the room had changed, colder, more alert. The basement was no longer indifferent. It was aware. I turned off the light and bolted up the stairs. Be good. My boyfriend was sound asleep. I curled up next to him and tried to slow my breath. He didn't stir, and I didn't wake him. I needed to feel someone next to me more than I needed to explain. In the morning, I told him everything. I expected concern, or at least curiosity. Instead, he laughed. "You're serious? Elmo just started talking?" I nodded. He chuckled harder. "That toy only talks when you rock it. You probably dreamt it." But I hadn't. He insisted I was crazy. The toy's voice was too clear, too precise. I hadn't imagined it. And the noise before it, the bang, that was real. He mocked me for days, brought it up in front of his friends, mimicked Elmo's voice. "Let's rock," he'd say, wobbling his shoulders like the toy. I laughed with it, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, but I knew the truth. I never went back into that basement without every light on. And even then, I avoided looking Elmo in the eyes